bosses. Welcome to About Her Business, the podcast where we leave all the gossip at the door and get straight down to business. I'm your host, Jonte. And today we have the CEO of Flying Solo, Miss Erin Wolpert. Now, Miss Wolpert is a licensed grief and trauma coach whose mission is driven from her own personal experience with loss. After feeling like losing her identity, she took a trip of a lifetime that would truly turn her pain into purpose. And she's here today to help us move forward on what she means business. So, ladies, grab your cups and your notepads, and let's get down to it. The meeting is now in session. Welcome, Miss Wolpert.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Are you ready to get started?
I sure am. Let's go.
Now, as I mentioned, you experienced your own personal loss. After losing your husband, after 15 years of marriage, what did grief look like for you in those early months, especially while parenting teenagers?
So, grief in the early months was like a fog. That's the best way for me to describe it. And I didn't realize that for almost a year and a half after the fact. I just had to go back to being mom. I was now a single mom with two busy teenagers. It was, we just gone through the holidays. Everybody was going back to school. We just had to go straight back to business. I didn't get the chance to lay in bed and wallow or just block out the world. I just had to get back and function. So the first probably year and a half was nothing but fog and just trying to make it, each day into the next.
Mhm. And as a person who identifies with your situation a lot, being a teen who mother was married to her father as well, and they were married at the time of my dad's death, and just watching my mom pick herself back up and just keep going. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail about that. When did the realization hit you, and why were you feel like you were surfaced back then?
So the realization probably hit me about a year and a half after he died. It was really, I didn't function very well for a while. And through the process of it all and trying to just pick up the pieces and be mom and dad and chauffeur and everything else to both of my very busy children, I started to realize I didn't know who I was and I didn't know who I was without being married and without being a mom, without being a dad. And what I realized was life has to go on. I can't stay in this fog. He's gone. I have to figure out how to make everything work for my kids and myself. My son struggled a lot with leaving the house and going to school and being productive. And so my focus really in the first year was really on him because I had to figure out how to just get him out the door every day. He struggled the most of the three of us. My daughter went the day after the funeral and just kept going on as if life really hadn't changed, but it had. And there were little things every day that we had to work, but I felt like I couldn't cry in front of the kids. And it took me a while to realize it was okay to be sad in front of my kids. It was okay to not have all the answers. And it was okay to say, this sucks. I don't want to do this right now.
Yeah.
And that realization really broke everything open for me. So that's, I think, about a year and a half after my husband passed away, everything started to change.
And again, thank you for sharing with our audience because you made a great point of how you and your daughter both just went back to work the day after the funeral, which brings me to my next question about how women, we rarely even talk about grief. And quite often we just isolate ourselves. So what support did you expect to find that actually wasn't there?
So I really thought I would have resources to lean on, especially with the kids. And I had stuff like there were people that helped me ran my kids to practices and get them places. There were people that brought food. But that'll end it at some point, right? Everybody goes back to their lives. They're done grieving. They don't are not functioning or struggling with the loss anymore. They've gone back to normal life. So it took realizing that all that's gone and I can't find the right support for my son to realize something had to change. And there had to be not just a change within me, a change within the system. And taking that and finding ways to make life doable for a grieving mom who's also dealing with grieving children. And think about it. I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my kid's father. So not only am I grieving my spouse. I'm grieving the fact that my kids don't have a parent. I'm dealing with their grief, and I'm trying to not but hide the fact that I'm still sad because I don't want my kids to think I'm sad. I want my kids to think I'm okay because if I'm okay, they're okay. But that's not the way things work. Grief comes and goes in waves, and some days we are succeeding, some days we're not. And looking at the big picture of it and realizing that after a couple weeks, my friends moved on and they're not thinking about it anymore was hard.
And you made a great point because oftentimes, especially, when I was 15 and I lost my father, I expected to see my family every single day. Eventually dwindled down and basically everybody kind of disappeared. So you had, let's just go back to living your normal life. Now, if you say that you were in a fog, can you describe what that was?
So the best for me to describe this is you're using my example I use a lot. Um, so my husband died in 22. In March of 24, I went and visited my best friend in Sedona, in Arizona. She lives in Sedona now. And in visiting her, we went to the Grand Canyon. And when I got to the Grand Canyon, it was completely fogged in. It was a wall of white. So imagine all this that's blurred behind me was just white. I have a picture that I have on my social media and I share a lot. That says they tell me there's a canyon back there, but that's how it felt. I felt completely closed in. I felt like I didn't know which end was up, what was going on, and I didn't know what life was going to be like after. Right? So as the more time I spent at the Grand Canyon that day, as the fog began to lift and you could see the beauty in front of you, and you could see this amazing canyon that was coming about what looked like it was coming out of nowhere, it clicked in with me that that fog that was closing in and making that wall of white around me was closing me in and making me feel like I couldn't dig my way out because I couldn't find my way through the fog. But as it lifted, as the day went on, the sun came out and I allowed, me personally allowed the sun back in my life. I was able to see the beauty in front of me and see the beauty that was within me that I couldn't see before. That's the reason why I use fog a lot because that day at the Grand Canyon was life changing for me.
Oh,
I
wow.
have a whole workshop I did on lifting the fog that I'm actually probably going to be redoing again soon and sharing. It's just an amazing idea to think about just being enclosed in this wall of nothingness and digging your way out of it and finding the beauty in your life and within you because I found things in me I didn't know were there.
Oh my gosh. That was not what I was expecting. Your answer. If y'all could have seen me as she was talking, like the grin and the glow up that I had as she was just describing, I mean, it's one of those beautiful spiritual experiences that's until you experience it in your own personal life, you may not necessarily be able to see it in someone else's. But when you were describing it, I just literally said, yeah.
That whole trip was life altering for me because then we went to the Grand Canyon on Saturday. On Sunday, I went to Sedona, and Sedona is powerful. I didn't realize how powerful and life changing that was going to be as well. Because when I sat in the church at Sedona and stared out the window looking at the red rocks, I could hear my husband in the back of my head going, "It's okay, come on." And then later that day, we were sitting on top of a small mountain of rocks. And I was just dangling my feet over a ledge, looking at the world in front of me and all that had been created and thinking about water created all this, right? And I was thinking, all right, I can do this.
Wow.
At that point, I came home from that trip completely altered.
Like I say, y'all, it's just one of those moments of where because being a person that experienced that loss of just losing your father, you go on that moment of where you're in a fog, like you say, and you're trying to find the beauty in that moment. And just to have nature. That's why nature is commonly used in mental health because it can help you find the beauty and help you
Mhm.
find purpose in what you're going through. Now, we've been talking about Arizona for a minute, and we've talked about how it had such a major turning point for you.
Yeah.
What shifted for you during that visit with your best friend?
So, my best friend moved to Arizona 6 months after my husband died. So she was my go to. It was with me every day from the time we realized he was not waking up until he died. Every planning the funeral, getting through the funeral, being that person with me, bringing his ashes home so I didn't have to carry them the first time, all of that. She was my and still is my person. An energy in Arizona that I've never experienced anywhere else in my life. It's spiritual, not religious, but there's also religious awakening for me. Cause like, as I said, I was sitting in a pew in Sedona United Methodist Church, one of my favorite places on earth right now, staring out at the red rocks, going, I can do this.
Mhm.
Right. And it was completely like my spirit changed. I felt uplifted. I realized at that point, I can cry if I want to cry. I hid my tears for 2 years because I didn't think my kids should have to hear me cry. I didn't think my kids could handle seeing me cry. And as I sat at Airport Mesa with the rock staring out at all of Sedona in front of me, and I just cried. I sat through church that day and cried. I sat through and just cried. And it literally felt an energy shift and said to myself, it's okay. I can go home. I can do this. I've got this. I can be the mom my kids deserve. And I can be the woman I've always wanted to be.
And,
And literally things started changing after that trip.
you know, a lot of people don't think that crying is a good thing. A lot of people think that you're weak in that moment and it's horrible. And so,
So one of the things I like to tell my clients when I'm working with them, and I tell them crying is okay. And I tell them that we cry because we loved and we cry because we cared. You wouldn't cry if you didn't care. And you wouldn't cry for someone who died if you didn't that person, right? And tears are not weakness. Tears are, those emotions need a way out. So my one client I'm working with right now, I tell her at the beginning of every session that it's okay to say I don't want to talk about it, and it's okay if you are crying. And during different times in in calls we're doing, she will have tears running down her face, and you know what? That's good. There are times where I just cry at it for no reason. Tears are not a bad thing. Tears are not a weakness, but so many people think they are. I used to cry a lot at different things and people would make fun of me for it, but I cry because I care.
I agree because when you think about it, it's literally it's someone that you spent dear moments with, and just not being able to have them spend the next moment with you. You do deserve to give yourself that
Well,
moment.
you're also not only, and I mentioned the grieving my husband and grieving my spouse. I mean, you're also grieving that future you're not going to have anymore. So as the days go on and life isn't the way you thought it was going to be, you're going to be sad because this is not the future I envisioned. I never would have thought at 51 years old I'd be single
Mm-hmm.
and trying to figure out what am I doing and do I want to stay? Am I staying single for the rest of my life? Am I gonna start dating? And what am I gonna do? Right? But at 51 years old, I know me better than I knew me either time I was married before.
And that's another powerful thing is, and we mentioned this earlier in the episode about you finding your identity. So
Yeah.
let's move over to how you help others find life after loss. What does that phrase really mean to you beyond just the inspirational version that people often hear?
So we talk a lot. I have a small community that's a membership, and then also on my Facebook groups and stuff. And we will talk about what we want out of life because you are dealing with sometimes the grief of what if, or the grief of life is not what I wanted it to be. Or, I'm now a single. What am I doing with my life? So we will discuss a lot of options of what you want out of life. What is it you're looking for and what will help you feel fulfilled? Yes, we have to talk about what we went through, but what we went through made us who we are today. So looking at that and looking at what we want to how we want to picture ourselves in the future and how we work our way towards that, whether it's I have one client that she'd retired when her husband got sick. And I said, maybe we're going to volunteer. What have you always wanted to do that you never did because it wasn't something he wanted to do? Or what is something you always wanted to do, but you couldn't do because you were working? And we look at those different angles. And for me, I looked at what is it I always wanted to do, but I didn't do? Or what is it I want out of life? Because I'm still young enough that I can have a future. So how do I want that future to look? And how do I want my kids to see me
Mm.
as I'm making my life forward? And that's a lot of what a lot of reflection, a lot of thought process, a lot of journaling, a lot of affirmations, because you got to learn to love yourself again. When you lose who you are with loss and grief and trauma and any of those kind of things that go on in our lives, we often lose our own identity and we stop liking ourselves. I did not like myself when my husband died. I didn't like to look at myself in the mirror. I didn't like, I hid myself under heavy clothing, long hair, pulled my hair up in ponytails, whatever. I didn't want people looking at me. I wanted to be in the background, not the center of attention. But I realized with my personality and who I was and what I wanted, I want to be out in the forefront. I don't want to hide. I don't want to be in the shadows. I want to be that person people come to. I've always wanted to be that person people came to, but I always did it behind the scenes.
Mhm.
I did lots of different things. I used to teach a new members class at my church. So I bring new people into our church. But when they joined, I just kind of hid, right? Like I didn't talk to me again. And I didn't make any effort to be out there in front, welcoming those people. I want to be that person that people turn to. And I want to be that person that says, I want to be you. When someone's talking about grief and problem, you should talk to Erin.
I love it.
And not because I'm a coach, because I want to help. That's part of the reason I created my membership and my community more than just one-on-one sessions. Having a group, a community of people that can come together and have that support, not even just from me, but from other people that can give them different opinions. That's one of my favorite things in life I have done since I lost my husband. I joined a network group of it's all women, but they all support me. When I said this is what I wanted to do, they all stood behind me. I joined that group as a pampered chef consultant. I am now a grief and trauma coach. Joined a coaching group of women who are creating their own businesses and creating their lives and becoming female entrepreneurs. And when we're having bad days, we message in the group chat and there's always someone there that will support you. That's what I want. And that's what Learning Fly is designed to be. So Learning to Fly is just that. It's a small community. I'm hoping to keep it very small, but it's a small community of women mostly. I have not completely turned out the idea of have men join, but are women who need that place to be, who need that community, who need that backup and support when they're having a bad day.
Oh, I love it. And thank you for creating such a community from your own personal experience that has helped others in their own personal experiences as well. Speaking of which, when did your own personal healing journey start to feel like, hey, let's go become a coach?
So after my trip to Arizona, one of my friends is a mindset coach. I started working with her, just trying to figure out who I was, right? And then also in my networking group, which that's where the mindset coach came from. Also in the networking group was a woman who was doing Reiki and she could do it remotely, but she lived close to me. So I went and did a Reiki session, which I was never sure any of that worked. However, and I've never been able to shut my mind off enough to meditate until now. I left that Reiki session that day knowing what I wanted to do. It was just like a light switch flipped. I left that session. I texted my best friend. I said, I know what I want to do. I want to be a grief coach. She says, what do you mean you want to be a grief coach? I said, I want to help other women deal with their grief. And I want to do it in a way. And I couldn't really describe the way I want to do it. I said, just want to do it in a way that women know they're supported. Within 2 weeks, I was signed up for a life coach program. So I am certified. I am a certified life and coach. I then, in the process of doing that program that was very focused on health and not focused on the life side of it until the very end, and was getting frustrated, I stumbled into a program to become trauma certified. And I thought, well, let me look at this. And I talked to the woman that was running the program and I joined the program almost instantly. And I am certified through the Ross Institute of Trauma to work with people dealing with trauma. But my trauma is really looking at deal with abuse and women that have been abused or had been in bad relationships and those kind of things, childhood abuse, all of that. But my focus really is still on finding them through that whole process of working their way through that. But I did that. And then once that program, like a light bulb went off. And I knew at that point, this is what I was doing. So it took me about 9 months. I completed both programs. I then did a certification just on grief. So I have a grief certification, I have a trauma certification, and then I have a life coaching certification. I wanted to have every resource, and I'm always reading. I have a stack of books, probably a foot tall next to my bed, of grief and trauma and anything workshops that I can do to create and find that source to help women. And that's so it was June. I think I started in June of 24. It's 26 now. Yeah, June of 24. So the program, I started flying solo a little over a year ago. It was November of 24. I started flying solo and started seeing my first client through that. I had to do with my life coaching program, I had to work with two clients to work my way through the program and get my certification. So I'm still working with one of them. She's now become my VA. She does a lot of and she edits all my stuff for me. But I work through that process with women and worked with multiple different women on multiple different things. And it's not even just grief. I do trauma. Like I've had a client that has had, we work on anticipatory grief, which is the grief of, starts with diagnosis. I worked with women who have had spouses that cheated on them. I have worked with women who have lost their spouses. I have a client who was in an abusive relationship, both with her parents and her first husband. I do all of that because I want women to know they don't have to be stuck in what they were before.
And
Be
go ahead.
that's my joy. My joy is watching women change over the course of working with them.
Mhm. And again, thank you for going into detail and explaining to our audience exactly how that looks and how you work with so many different women because again, women, we like to ball up our emotions. We've been talking about trauma and grief. They're not often talked about together. How do you explain that connection to women you work with?
So the connection between grief and trauma, not all trauma is I mean, not all grief is trauma related, not all trauma causes grief, but they're so often intertwined because sometimes it's a traumatic event that causes us to grieve. And I talk often about that grief isn't always about loss. It doesn't have to always be death. I mentioned earlier the grief of what if. I mentioned anticipatory grief. I mentioned grieving the future you didn't have, but you also have women who are divorced who are grieving that marriage that ended. They may have been the one to choose to leave the marriage, but divorce is like death without the funeral. So you don't have that grieving period. And it could be a traumatic event that has now altered our future. And we're grieving what we thought we were going to have. So, say you're in a relationship where your spouse, you are an abused spouse. You're in all this future you thought you had, that you thought you married the right person. You're grieving that person you thought you knew. You're grieving the fact that you let them do whatever they did to you. And you're grieving the loss of yourself in that process. You have just any kind of loss. I will often say, so doesn't seem like trauma to most, but as a child, when my parents split up, I blame myself. I was in second grade when my parents got divorced. I thought if I had been a better kid, they wouldn't have gotten divorced. Now, logically, I know that's not true. It had nothing to do with me, but trauma is something that has a long term effect on you. So this wasn't trauma in ways most people think of trauma, but it was a traumatic event for me mentally, emotionally. So I spent my entire life people pleasing, which is fawning, which is one of the four trauma responses. to make up for the fact that I thought my parents' divorce was my fault. So, you know, I could have at 6 gone into fight, flight, feet, and then but I chose for some reason I went into fawn. Most people haven't heard of fawn, but fawn is people pleasing. And when you are altered personally by an event and it's a long-term effect, that's trauma. And I will talk a lot about, stress. People confuse stress and trauma in that kind of scenario. Stress ends at some point, right? Trauma doesn't. You have that lifetime effect of that event that was part of your history that affects you. And now I am 45 years later, still think, in the back of my head, people pleasing to make people like me because I think if they like me, they won't leave me.
Wow.
So that's a lot of how I intertwine it. We'll talk about how that event altered us. Would I have made some same decisions in my life if I hadn't spent my entire life people pleasing?
Wow.
And that's a lot of where the grief of what if comes in. Because if you had made a different decision, how would your life be different? And would you have lived the life you wanted to live if you'd made a different decision instead of ending up in the situation you're in?
Ooh, people pleasing is starting to become a popular term that is used on social media these days. And,
Yeah.
as a person who, as you said, went straight to that foreign state, I too became a people pleaser and had to learn, especially now that I'm an entrepreneur. So let's talk about grief and becoming an entrepreneur. It cannot be easy doing both at the same time. So
It's not. It is not. No. So as I'm trying to move through grief, I guess, I think I end up falling back and like reliving a lot of it over and over again. So that those waves of grief will hit me differently because I'm really focused on the different steps. I'm creating a program, 3 programs called what I'm calling the 3 F's of grief, which are functioning after loss, finding yourself after loss, and then the third one, which hasn't been started yet, is flourishing after loss. But in functioning and finding, I really had to go back and relive a lot of what I went through and a lot of what I dealt with as I tried to find myself and find my way out so I could literally just function and find the day to day. So becoming an entrepreneur was really hard because in the beginning I really doubted myself. I thought maybe doing all this was just a way to get me through my grief. Yes, it has got me through my grief and has helped me find myself in a way I never thought I would. But creating flying solo coaching has changed my life because it has made me realize I don't have to find. And I can share my pain without it defining me. I never use the word widow when I talk about myself, ever. I never say I'm a widow. I'm a single mom. And the reason I don't use the word widow is how many times have you heard the word widow and you think and you feel sorry for that person?
quite often.
I don't want people to feel sorry for me.
Mm.
So, and it's not because I'm people pleasing or doing anything to make myself feel better. I'm doing it because I want to feel empowered. And being an entrepreneur and starting flying solo and creating this business that I hope someday will be my only job is amazing because I know out there in my future, there are women that are looking for me and they're women that need what I have to offer. They need my programs and they need someone to listen to them. I like I said, I went through therapy, I went through coaching, I tried everything. I read books on grief. I did so much, but it wasn't until I really started talking about my grief with people and explaining how it felt and having that aha moment and being able to describe that fog, that's when things changed.
Abs
When I could explain to somebody what living in that fog was like, I knew flying solo was worth it.
Thank you for being so vulnerable with our audience and showing how you truly turn your pain into purpose because we're entrepreneurs. We're out here looking for that inspiration, and you may end up going through a loss. And may not necessarily know how to pick yourself back up, or you may have been in a marriage for a while and that person, you depended on them to help you, say, pay the bills or take care of the kids. And now you're trying to navigate how to get through life again. So thank you so much for just being vulnerable with our community. I know this is going to be an inspiration to
I really
us.
hope so.
Now, for the women who are listening, who
Mhm.
may have experienced the loss of a spouse, what do you want them to know about the reinvention of yourself in your 40s and beyond?
I want women to know that no matter what age you are, when you are suddenly single and trying to figure out how to do it alone, which is what Flying Solo is, my tagline for Flying Solo is, that there's a community out there that wants to support you, that you can be whoever you want to be. And at 49, 50 years old, creating my own business and becoming an entrepreneur and becoming this person that I have become has been the best part of my life, other than my children. But honestly, knowing I can be there to help a woman discover herself and discover her purpose and find a way to turn her pain into purpose, there's nothing like it.
That's just beautiful because when you take what you've been through and help somebody else get through it, that's literally the moment where you know you've truly found your own purpose. So, speaking of purpose, how has becoming a grief and trauma coach changed the way you view your own story?
It has made my story look, it has let me know that no matter what I've been through, it didn't end with John. It didn't end when he died. And really, I just started a new chapter of that book, right? I opened it, or maybe I opened the sequel. This is my sequel. This is my my life hereafter. I went through I mentioned that John wasn't my first marriage. I was married to a gentleman before. Yeah, was married to somebody before. And that wasn't, it was a very bad marriage, which should never have happened, but it led me to where I am. And each of these steps that we get us to where we are today create the women we are today. And the woman we are today can stay this way or she can become the best version of herself. And finding out what in you can turn into your purpose and into your drive and into your future is amazing. And when I talk to women and I see that change within them, I see the smile coming back. I see the color coming back in their face because they are no longer feeling like life is too heavy. That's when you know they found their way and they have found their purpose and they have found what they want. They don't have to live under the grief and the pity and the I'm not good enough part of life anymore. I no longer hate looking at myself in the mirror. I used to get on a Zoom call and just cringe because I had to see myself on the screen. Doesn't face me anymore. I used to wear baggy clothes that would hide how heavy I am. I wear stuff that's fitted now because I want to be me. I don't wear all black. I wear color because I can be whatever I want to be. And I can smile and I chopped my hair off not too long ago and, letting it go gray. And I got criticism for that too. But you know what? I love it because I'm realizing Erin's sassy, Erin's fun. Erin can be whoever Erin wants to be. And I hope all women realize they can be whoever they want to be in this life. And yes, your past created you, but it doesn't hold you back.
I love it. The becoming the unapologetically you is what I love to call it. Now, we sadly run out of time today, but we always leave with a legacy. And I'll give you a few minutes to think about this. When people think about your work a few years from now, what do you hope women remember how you help them move through grief?
I want women to realize it's okay to grieve. It's okay to be sad, but it's also okay to be happy. You, you can smile and laugh and have joy while grieving, and you can figure out who you are through that pain. And I hope women realize that when they needed somebody, I was there for them.
I love it. And if nobody else feels it, I tell you right now, Miss Wolpert, you've helped me heal in aspects today and helped me view in a different perspective from my mother's own perspective on things that I experienced after my own dad's loss. So again, thank you for just coming on and sharing your own personal journey. But before we leave and adjourn,
Yes.
I want to make sure that we get all your information. Let us know how to sign up for Flying Solo. Let us know all your socials. Let us know all the details.
So my website is flyingsolo.life. I am on Facebook as Flying Solo Coaching. Instagram's a little weird, but it's flying underscore solo underscore life. So flying solo life there as well. All the information is on my socials and my website to contact me. Email address is flyingsolocoaching@gmail.com. But contact me if you're interested in the membership and you're learning to fly and finding out more about what I do. Just contact me. I will set up what I call my Reclaiming You calls. It's a half-hour free Zoom call where we discuss what you're dealing with and we find the best method for you, whether it's one-on-one coaching, whether it's my free community, or whether it's my membership. My membership is building extremely. I've got other friends. My girlfriend that was my mindset coach is going to be popping in. I have a fitness and health coach that's going to pop in and talk sometimes. So we will be doing monthly Zoom calls and just educating women on the best ways to become their best selves. And I think that's a legacy and an ability for all of us out there is we women supporting women to become their best selves is the best thing out there.
And we will be leaving all the information down in the description box. Any last words before we adjourn today's meeting, Ms. Wolpert?
I just want to thank you for this time and talking to me about your journey and losing your father as well and what your mom went through. And it's just has really helped me know, as I talk to everybody, it always helps me know that I'm not here by doing this alone. I'm not the only single mom raising teenagers. And one day we'll all be there to support each other.
And with that, ladies, today's meeting is now adjourned. Thanks again to licensed trauma and grief coach Erin Wolpert and Flying Solo for coming on and sharing all her insights. Be sure to subscribe to About Her Business wherever you receive your podcast so you never miss whatever we'll upload. Also, leave some comments down in that comment section on which industry you think we should interview next. Until next time, keep your goals tight, that circle tighter, and that bank account growing.